Welcome to The Writer's Dream. It's time to give another talented Long Island author a chance to talk about how he wrote his book, how he published his book, and how he marketed his book. You can find us on YouTube. Just search The Writer's Dream or search my name, Linda Maria Frank. I am the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries. And we have over 100 interviews with different authors on that YouTube channel. So if you're interested in writing, publishing, marketing, or you just are interested in finding good books from local authors, please visit that YouTube channel. We're also on Facebook, and what you will find on Facebook is that as I interview the authors, I also put some material on there about their biography and also their interview. If you want to be on the show, please message me through Facebook. And then I will make sure that I get back to you, or even if you have a question about the show. Today's guest is Vincent Casale, and he has written a book, The Casualties of Divorce. And this is a topic that I think is extremely important in our society because the divorce rate, I think, is about 50%. A little bit more. And climbing,
yes. It's a little more than 50% now, on Long Island especially.
Right, because people really, I think especially women have more options. More women work, so they have financial options, so they feel this freedom to divorce. And I think men do too. I think people in society feel freer to be individuals, and it's good. But then marriage, and then we can talk about what we think the future of marriage will be. But what inspired you to write this book?
Well, obviously I'm product of divorce now, so that inspired me.
Me too.
And what happened was I had written a book previously, a memoir about my time in the police department, working with the motion picture industry. But when I was getting the word out on that book, I became reacquainted with friends of mine from the police department that I hadn't seen in years, and coincidentally or ironically, they were going through divorces at the same time that I was. So we reconnected, sort of like the men around the campfire thing, and one of my friends was very good friends with a psychologist who was also the third co-author of this book, and he had read The Paparazzi, and he asked my friend Jason if I would get involved in a group book with the three of us co-authoring a book from man's point of view, not a misogynist point of view, just a man's point of view.
Right. Well, I think that men and women come to divorce from two different places, as they come to marriage from two different places, and it's important, I think, to respect both.
Right.
But just a few words about your first book, The Paparazzi. Vincent's first book is about his time on the police force protecting stars and celebrities who were doing TV shows and interviews and whatnot.
Pictures, yeah. And whenever they came to New York to film, we would be assigned to these sets, whether it was still photography, motion pictures, television, and many celebrities. So it was a big kick for me.
Yes, and I highly recommend the book because there are some great stories in there.
Thank you so much. And I did your show after
That's
after
right,
that book, yes.
and look for Vincent's first interview on the show. You just kind of have to scroll down through the interviews or use the search
Yes.
bar on YouTube. But I read that book and it was very enjoyable.
Thank you.
And this book, I've looked through this book, and it looks like it's got some very good material. So tell, if you want to, tell us about your experience with divorce and why that inspired you to write this book.
Well, what I found was, and of course this book was not as pleasant to write as The Paparazzi, because it's, when you're reliving a painful experience and through your writing, it kind of drudges up the pain. And but what inspired me to write it was, like I said, many of my friends were coincidentally or not going through divorce at the same time, and what we did was, as co-authors, is we just went wherever we were, in bars or barbecues or wherever we were that we knew people. We started asking the divorced men if we could not share their stories on a personal level, but incorporate their stories into our book as a generic type of thing, because what we did was, instead of textbook writing each individual, we made two main characters, composite characters, with about 25 interviews, and we took the generic
Right.
storylines of each person and just melded them into two people, so that it would read more like fiction than it would a textbook.
Right. No,
So there'd be a little
yeah.
bit of a story rather than, Harry did this and Jane did this.
So actually you found patterns.
Found patterns, very similar patterns, and we took a little bit of each person and made it two central figures, but the dynamics were the same. The pain was the same. The parental and alienation was the same. Finances were the same. But what made me write it was, a lot of it was cathartic, because I had gone through a painful ending after a 20-year marriage, 3 children. No one expects to be divorced, especially in their 50s. And life was going to take on a new direction for me and my ex-wife, as well as my children. And like millions of other people, it took on a direction that I wasn't prepared for. So
Nobody's prepared for divorce.
so I went from living in a very nice lifestyle to the proverbial basement with one little window, and barely seeing my children, and the bickering, and then the actual courtroom drama of divorce, which I don't recommend for anybody, because the only people that really make out on that are the attorneys.
The lawyers.
And they really do make out.
I know.
I'm not here to bash attorneys, but when it comes to divorce law, they know how to make their money. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I wrote the book, and it's a hope that, because a lot of men want to be macho, and they don't want to tell anyone their feelings, right, the pain they go through, both still being in love or being a parent that's separated from his children. Men will clam up. They won't be as emotional as maybe some women might. Right. So I wanted men who read this book to see that, especially since it's incorporated into many people, that there is a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow. I want women to see that too.
Yes.
That men just don't leave the marriage and run to a bar and have a party and go on vacations and don't feel that he's not home anymore. Of course, there are many people that are happy to be divorced. Obviously, this book is not for them. There are men who couldn't wait to get out of their marriages, and women. These are for the people that weren't sure or somehow had to get out, and now they were left pretty much like starting from scratch at middle age.
Yeah.
And
did you find that the men you interviewed, that there was also a commonality of reasons for divorce?
That's the commonalities. A lot of the reasons, believe it, are barring I call the 3 major factors, which I don't incorporate in this book. I mean, infidelity, domestic violence, alcoholism, all the bad reasons for people have to get divorced are really, this is more like the people that somehow just
Fell out of love
or whatever, because
drifted apart.
Right, as a retired policeman, the bad stuff I realize, and people should realize, you have to get out.
Yeah.
You can't, there's very few circumstances where people will stay in. This is much for the people that could be forgiving or not forgiving, and they just seem to drift apart. And then they don't know what to do after it's completely over. But I'm veering off. Your original question was to that?
My question really was there a commonality of motivations for divorce? And you pretty much answered that.
Yes. Yes.
There's the ones where you have to get out, and then there's the ones where it's not the best relationship for you anymore.
Exactly, and that was the commonality in this. Boredom, affection, the things that people use, and then right down to the proverbial, you left the toothpaste cap off the cap off the mundane, how it just came to be without knowing how time passed where it just fell apart and you didn't have time to repair it because you just let it go and you let it go. So many marriages could be saved.
Yes, yes. I think marriage, I think people get married and they take marriage for granted. They don't take each other for granted so much. They take the marriage for granted and think that it's going to last forever with no work put into it. And I think that marriage, like anything else, like a good business, requires work. You have to find a way to relate to each other. I mean, once you have kids, I mean, even just having relations with your spouse becomes a problem because the kids are always around. All those kinds of things. And I think that you have to somehow or other find the time for each other and reach out to each other, because I can't imagine living with somebody for 20 years, 25, 30 years without ever coming together at periodically, just to keep that marriage going. We're human.
But the commonality of myself and these people are exactly what you just explained. I was married 20 years, 3 children. Life gets busy, and one weekend goes and you don't go to dinner together, and the second weekend goes and you don't go to the movies, and the kids are always busy. So one parent is doing this, the other parent, 2 parents are working, so everyone's trying to shuffle around, and before you know it, it cracks, and you sometimes don't have time to repair it,
Or one of the people, the man or the woman, become vindictive about it.
there's anger.
Yeah, they're angry.
You work more than I do.
Yeah.
I work more than you do. You're staying on the couch more than I have to stay on the couch. You went for a ride, you disappeared for 3 hours. So it's all these little things, but they culminate into that big basket of I'm fed up.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I don't want to do this anymore.
I don't want to do this anymore. And in my case, because I'm a writer, I consider writers being artists, like actors and
Absolutely.
such. And we have this romanticized version of the world, of life. And I've even had a woman tell me recently, this isn't a novel and this isn't a movie. You want to write your own screenplay when you're married, and you want to write it when you're divorced. And it's not real life, but this is how, again, this is how people come to, they think it's one way and it turns out to be another, and then it's hard to handle. It's that old grass is greener thing, and sometimes it is, but many times it's not.
Yeah, there was a wonderful movement. I don't know if they still do it. I think it was through the Catholic Church. It was called Marriage Encounter. And this is where the couple would go away to like a retreat house with other couples, and there were counselors there, and they gave them, I guess they talked about different aspects of marriage, but you left there with the assignment of having to write in a journal, and you had to write in the journal every day and then agree on a day of the week that you would get together and share your feelings.
Right.
That's working on a relationship. And some of the people I know who did this, it scared the hell out of them because they would have to share feelings that they weren't comfortable with. Some of the people said, this is too much work, I don't want to do this. And some of the people did it and saved their marriage.
Well, again, like you said, Linda, it's a matter of who wants to work on it, and many people do not.
No.
Because it's easy.
Well, you're busy, and sometimes I know my own personal feeling was that when I got married, and I was young when I got married, was that the marriage, this romance, this feeling of love should just carry everything along with it, and then life happens.
Exactly, exactly. Life happens, and once life happens, then you have to tough it out.
So you did also mention that there's sort of stages in the divorce. And do you want to explain that a little bit? And
well, the first stage, I believe, even though you see it coming sometimes, it's a shock stage. When you're living with someone for 20 years and you're cohabitating with a family, and now you're out, and you know at the time you leave the house, you know it's 75% certain you're out for good. I mean, you always have a little hope, maybe, but you know you're out. And so there's a shock. And I would imagine even from the other side. I mean, in all due respect, I'm sure the person that stays in the house, even though they're still in their comfort zone, their spouse is gone. So there's hurt on both parts. So the first thing is shock, and then the next stage is, okay, what do we do? And it takes you a while to really want to get that attorney because you're still not sure. So once the stage comes where you get the attorney, now the little bit of friendship you've had with the person becomes no friendship at all.
Right. Your adversaries.
Your adversaries. So you're willing to tolerate each other until that point. Once the attorneys get involved and you sit in a room, in a courtroom, in the back room, the four of you, you don't even know that person anymore that's sitting across from you. And
it's a weird feeling, isn't it?
It is the strangest feeling that anyone could imagine. I mean, I still, I mean, you know a person more than half your life, and now it's
a stranger who's your adversary.
It's a stranger and a person that doesn't want to see you do well, and you don't want to see them do well at that particular moment. And it's a sad thing. So you have to go through that stage. And then finally, you have to go through the stage, not finally, but you have to go through the stage with your children if you have children. You're used to seeing them every single day of their lives. Now you're not anymore. You don't know what's going on. Sometimes your spouse might keep something from you. And so you're constantly in worry of what's going on in that house without me being there. So, I mean, look, when girls or boys become teenagers, they don't want to play much with their parents anyway. But when you don't live at home, you feel that 10 times.
And also, they take sides.
And they take sides, and they take sides depending on who they're living with and what parent is saying what about the other parent. I mean, there's an old rule that you shouldn't. They even write it in divorce stipulations. Parent will not say anything about the.
Try to enforce that one, right?
It's done. It's done all the time. Whether it's purposeful, whether it's vindictive, whether it's innocently, something comes out to make the other person, who is not there to protect themselves, not look so good. So there's all these stages, and then there's the stage of finality. It's over. That's it. Once the divorce is over now and the settlement's done, now you have to move on with your life. Are you ever going to be friends with your spouse? If you have no children, probably not. You'll be lucky enough to never have to see them again, quite frankly. But if you share children, it's pretty much the rest of your life, will I be able to be in the same room with this person? And you have to try to get past that for the kids' sake, too. Because the children will never say much, but you know that and that's a whole nother book. Children are devastated by divorce. I don't care what age they are, and I don't, they really are.
You're better off doing it when they're little.
Yes.
And they don't understand, and they can't be manipulated that way as much as teenagers.
Yes, and they, I mean, I can't tell you how many times my own children have said to me, now my youngest daughter's going off to college now, I just want you and Mom to be friends before I go to college. And this is 5 years, this is a 5-year divorce already. So they constantly want that. They want some kind of communication so they feel a little bit of family connection.
Do you know what I think that the lawyer you hire for your divorce settlement should be required by law to provide you with counseling, not counseling to save the marriage, but counseling to get the family through the divorce, to teach you that you have to get along for the kids, that you need not hate the other person. I think that might make a bit of difference, because I see people who really have gotten along for maybe 20 years, like yourself, pretty much civilly, and once the divorce comes along, they turn into monsters. They all of a sudden they hate each other, and they're very vindictive, and it never really works. It never works out for either one of them, this vindictiveness.
No, but unfortunately, both people have to agree on the counseling. Which I agree with you 100%. It's a wonderful thing, but I know many couples that wanted to do what you just suggested. They wanted to go into post-divorce counseling, not to get back together, but to bring the family into an environment where, okay, see, we can't live together, but I love Mommy, Mommy loves Daddy, and one or both parents didn't want to.
Well, I think if they are to be granted a divorce in New York State,
They have to do it.
They should have to do it.
Yes.
Just like in family court, there's certain kinds of situations which require that.
Yes.
And if you get a DWI, you have to go through that rehabilitation
And if the
program.
children are under 18, family court could require court-ordered counseling
Mm-hmm.
with at least one parent if the alienated parent chooses that that's what he wants.
Right.
But again, there's all these stages, and I don't know if I'm explaining them exactly
No, it's,
the way
you're very clear.
But, and then there's the post, okay, now your life, that part of your life is over stage. You want to stay obviously very close to your children. Now you have to move on. And you have to meet someone, or you have to be social.